I've never had a hoe cake. I don't know if I'm, if my black card is in question at this time. But from looking at it, what I do see is that it just looks reminiscent of so many different types of cakes, like Johnny cakes or even pancakes or whatever. And so can you speak to, I guess, how regionally we might have the same practices or habits that result in different?
A lot, and that's through not just black culture, but that's through a lot of cultures. So you'll see similarities in food, and maybe it's just prepared a little bit different, or the spices are a little bit different. So hoe cake, Johnny cake, pancake, cornbread. The significance of the actual term hoe cake, rumor has it, and historians say that it came from them pouring batter on a hoe and putting it on a flame to cook it. And that was, ingenious. That was why it has the name hoe cake.
And I think you bring up a good point that more often than not, food comes from necessity, and however our environment is structured and set up, and a lot of times our food is punched down on, our preferences, is seen as unhealthy or ghetto, but I think we just spoke to the value, how we revere our food. But if you had any sort of if you had to myth bust someone who was saying that black food just isn't healthy for you, what would you say in response to that?
I mean, I'm going to give them a whole lecture, but
First of all,
I would give them a whole lecture. There's a woman I follow, the black nutritionist, a doctor, and I just have joy in my heart every time I see a video or something with her explaining the plate and the idea that our food, and we unfortunately. We have some of the ideas ourselves about our food, and that hurts my heart. If I'm honest, when I first started my journey, my culinary journey, in school, they didn't even teach the class. It was regional cuisine. They got to soul food, and the instructor looked at me and said, "You want to tell them about soul food?" But more than that, once I graduated and got out into the world, and I made the decision, I'm doing what I'm used to doing, soul food, but I'm gonna do it a little bit differently. But I worked with a lot of chefs who looked like me that were real quick to tell me that's not what they do, and say it with such disdain. And that too was something that I thought, okay, I'm about to set out and show you differently. This is what I do, and I'm proud of what I do, and I'm proud of that food because it's good. It's good. I'm like, what my mama was cooking was delicious. I don't know why you would be ashamed of that.
And I think, to your point about internalizing those criticisms, it has a lot to do with ignorance about how certain habits became habits in the first place. Because when we talk about unhealthy eating habits, it has so much more to do with socioeconomic factors. So I was going to ask you to weigh in as someone who is literally paying attention to what goes onto their plate from farm to table, how we can even shift those narratives intentionally.
I mean, this conversation can get so deep, when we're starting to talk about unhealthy habits, it's not black culture to eat 3 meals a day. That's not, it's not really even necessary to eat 3 meals a day. But capitalism has taught us that you should have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and breakfast should be your most important meal. And you should have your Wheaties with your sugar and your milk and all these things that further along the American capitalistic goal of selling all these commodities. So, people that look at soul food and are seeing some of the ingredients and have prejudice towards them, they're not understanding that choices are made based off of resources, right? We kind of talked about this when we were at the farm that, many recipes may have been brought over, converted. What they could remember from what they had access to. But the ingredients were not there. And they were, like you said, they were only given scraps. So they had to use what was available to make the food that they made. Now, a lot of those things have stayed because humans are creatures of habit, but that does not necessarily mean that that's the end all be all, you know? And so these recipes that may call for items that may not be as healthy, you know, are not, you know, you're not locked to it. You know, and it's, you know, it's heartbreaking also because people, especially Black people, a lot of us unfortunately don't always know where we come from.
Yeah.
And that's a real big disconnect into this idea of pride, because how can you have pride for something that you have no knowledge of?
That's so true.
And that's why, and I think, you know, if I could speak just from observation, I think that's why a lot of people who get into this culinary field are going after these other nations, these other cultures, ways of food, because they see them as superior because they have no comfort in their own.
And we've been conditioned to believe we shouldn't have pride over our things. Quite literally looking into some history as we were researching for this episode, came up on the, how would I say this? The devaluation of the watermelon.
Yes.
And
oh,
how
wow.
and how watermelon, during the era of sharecropping, sharecroppers began to farm watermelons, grow watermelons for their own self-sustenance. And when they started making money, all of a sudden watermelons become socialized as this poor, dirty, cheap thing. And now it's Black people. Now it's Black people love watermelons and they're lazy. Like completely ludicrous things, but things that have stayed with us over the course of time that we once again internalize and then begin to get on the bandwagon of devaluing and then trying to create this narrative that Black people can do more, or we are better than this and we should look at all of our options. And it's not to say that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time, but there's nothing wrong with the food that belongs to us.
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't even really know what's available in the seasons. For you to be criticizing somebody eating a watermelon that is sometimes the most abundant fruit, the healthiest fruit to get during the summertime is ludicrous.
But I do think economics is that huge factor there, because you know, I see that especially in our neighborhoods. You know, you have $5 and you've got this many members of the family, and there's that chicken over there that's huge, okay? And the government at a point wanted to grow things faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper. We don't seem to take the time to educate ourselves sometime and understand that's what's happened. And so all of those hormones and all of those things that made that chicken go bigger, faster, are the things that also we forget, because all we know is that's a big chicken and I can get it for this amount of money and I can feed this many people. And then that leads to, now my blood pressure is high. Now I'm a diabetic. Now I have kidney disease. You know, I mean, I can keep going because I want to know why in our neighborhoods there's so many dialysis clinics. And you go to, you go to other neighborhoods. It's like, where's the dialysis clinic? There's some time I'm driving in our neighborhoods and every other block, that's what I'm seeing. You know, but in our stores, you know, in underserved areas, you know, you're basically serving us food or selling food that will sometimes kill us.
The priority
we
is
don't
totally
know.
different.
We don't know any better.
And in addition to our lack of access, there is just sometimes a lack of even capacity to be aware of certain things. And so I don't want to villainize or criticize anyone for ignorance, because sometimes that ignorance is also an intentional result of systemic injustice.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a big issue. It's a big thing.
Absolutely.
It's a big thing.
I do want to go ahead.
Oh, well, it makes the work that we're doing so important. You know, tackling food insecurities in the Metro Atlanta area is a mission statement of Atlanta Harvest. And so, I mean, but what does that mean, right? I mean, we've kind of touched on some ideas around, you know, what we have access to, what we have the money to afford, how many people we need to feed. And when you're thinking about that, you would think like, okay, well, I mean, if it's available, if that's all I have, then that's fine. But there are people out there that are not only providing better food sources, healthier food sources, for people to have access to in their communities, but also giving them the tools and education to do, you know, what it takes to make those things happen for themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's a lack of ambition or a lack of motivation for people to want to be healthier, but it's, you know, this is America, and this is the kind of environment that America has made for our people.
Yes.
But we want to encourage people to continue to keep pushing for what they deserve.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the programs that we champion at Atlanta Harvest is our 2-for-1 EBT.
Okay.
So for people who have food stamps, they can get half off, 50% on fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's with Wholesome Wave Georgia. I'm sure you're familiar
Yes,
with.
yes.
And so that's a way for us to get the people in the door
Yeah.
who are still having that kind of focus and showing them that there are better options.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, nutrient-dense food, because just because you're eating doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving the body what it needs. You know?
Exactly.
So nutrient-dense food, what that really means is, like, if you harvested this carrot, you're eating it within the week.
Yeah.
You know, preferably the first couple days, but you know, I know how it is. But you're eating it within the week and giving your body the chance to catch up on what it needs. Because when you eat, even if you have a big chicken and you spread it around, or you have lots of vegetables, and everybody has a chance to eat, if you're not feeding the body the vitamins and minerals, then in a few hours you'll still be hungry. And then we wonder why there's childhood obesity.
Yeah.
So continuing eating.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for this conversation. You have brought so much more to the top of mind when I think about food, because as I said earlier, some things we just take for granted. We don't really get into the intricacies of how food makes us feel good, and just some of the things we still struggle with food today. So thank you for the work that both of you all are doing. You educating people, creating opportunities, and making healthier foods more accessible. You for showing these folks we can indeed throw down and elevate at the same time with pride in our food stuffs. And I want to say thank you to you all for coming to our dinner party as well. I'd offer you a plate, but I'm not gonna, because I told you to get some food at the top of this episode, didn't I? But please stay right there. We'll be back with more from The People's Brief.